Welcome everyone for the Thursday Masterclass and a very warm welcome to our Master Coach, Mr. Giraj Sharma, founder of Behind the Moon Consulting Boutique, incepted in 2000. Giraj sir has spent close to 20 years in the sales and marketing domain and has headed the marketing function of Onida right through the glorious phase of the brands in the 90s. He is also very passionate about people development and has worked extensively in this area, conducting over 800 workshops for sales and marketing professionals. His books, his book reviews are a regular feature in Business World and Business Today. For our masterclass session today, Sir will talk to us about the relationship of karma and performance. This indeed is a very different topic, and I'm sure all of us are looking forward to it. Thank you so much, sir, for accepting our invitation. And over to you. We can begin now.
Right. Thank you so much. That was a very kind introduction. I hope I'm audible to everyone.
Yes, sir, you are.
Okay. So this is a pretty difficult topic, but a very interesting one. And I think there are layers and layers of this. And I think it is very relevant in today's time because not because of what we're going through, but I think when I say today's time, I mean pre the pandemic and post the pandemic. Something that most professionals have been struggling with, and I think there are solutions somewhere in the way the Indian thought process or the Indian philosophy has been. And when I say Indian, I am not talking or referring to any religion. I'm talking of the basic Indian philosophy. So there is enough and more there for us, in the modern world to sort of learn from there and improve our performance. And with that basic note, I think I'll straight away start with my slides. And the way we've structured it is that, about 45 minutes to 50 minutes is what I'll run you through my slides. And then we will open up for discussion. I hope that works for everyone. And I will now start with the sharing of my slides. Like I said, in the modern world today, we're looking at a lot of Western concepts of performance. I will touch upon some of those concepts as well. The Western concepts of what performance is, where they actually made performance linked to excellence. So we'll examine that as well, and we'll try and build a correlation between those concepts and the good old Indian concept of karma. So here we begin, and thank you for joining. And I know these are difficult times. We're all, most of us are at home. Which means I think we were discussing before the session started that the lines between workplace and the office and the home is they were earlier, if they were blurred, they've now completely disappeared. And it's difficult to take out 1 hour at home and concentrate on a master class of this kind. So thank you so much for joining in. We start out straight away. It's a privilege to be here to be addressing people at Indigo. You guys have been doing some awesome work. I've been watching some of the stuff that you've done, and I've watched it more critically ever since I committed to do this masterclass. So you'll be doing some fabulous work. So I think more often than not, you guys have been performing. So it's a privilege to be talking to performers and talking to them about how to enhance that performance. So it's challenging and interesting, all right. So it's my privilege to be here, and the topic we picked up is karma and performance. A small background, I'm basically a branding and a marketing guy, and spent a lot of my time, in fact, my entire professional life, and as a consultant, with marketing and sales and branding people. So somewhere, I started to read a lot on Indian philosophical thought, and I realize the multiple layers, and I still say that I'm still at the surface. It is so deep, it is unbelievable. The amount of work that's been done, the amount of stuff that's there, right? If you start from the Vedas and you come down to Vedanta, the Vedanta treaties, and you come down to the Upanishads, and then you come down to what they call as Itihas, where they cover the Mahabharata, Ramayana, and other such scriptures, down to to the rituals and the Purans. So it's huge. It's massive. And I don't think one can finish all that in a lifetime. But I have been trying to work on this, presented a few papers also, and I find it extremely exciting because not many people have ventured there in terms of linking it to corporate level performance. Yes, I think the last about a decade and a half, there've been some attempts to merge the popular perception of what performance is and what drives performance with some of the Indian philosophical thoughts. So that's it. We're going to be talking about karma and performance. It's a very complex issue, like I said, but I think you can trust a branding and marketing guy to take it on. I think all of us, I'm sure I can relate to most of you here. We have this crazy thing that, karke dekhte hain, let's go do it. That's typical branding and marketing guys. So, I'm one of you. So I said, okay, why don't we get on to this? I want to clarify that this is not a religious thing at all. So this is not about religion. In fact, if you go back to the Vedas, they don't talk about religion as the way we understand religion. Largely this is about thinking. This is about dhyan, as they call it, about meditation, about getting your thought process in place. So there's nothing religious about what I'm going to be presenting. And I think with me around, it just can't be, because I spent most of my life, working years, working with the devil. So I've been virtually sleeping with the devil, That's the brand that I was very closely associated with right from the inception of the brand, which is 1985 onwards. And I had the privilege of heading marketing there, and the brand, we was, this campaign of ours of You Need a Devil was something which became iconic. And so I have all my life lived with the devil. So how can I talk about religion? So it's not about religion any which way. Now, of course, I live behind the moon. So that's the name of the company that I work for. We founded in the year 2000, very small boutique. And here also, I think we are behind the moon. So I think there's nothing religious about us. So with that, we start. I've been very fortunate, to have had many gurus in my working life and otherwise. I think, surprisingly, I think some of my gurus, one of them passed away recently. It was a guy called Gautam Rakshit. He was the founder of Advertising Avenues. I think I've learned a lot about branding from him. So he was, for me, somebody who was like a guru to me, even though I was his client, and and we would have always, the way client agency relationships are. But having said that, I think I learned a phenomenal amount of what branding is all about from Gautam, and likewise, I've had a whole lot of other gurus in my working career. Some of them who influenced me directly, and a lot of them on where I heard them, I read about them, or I read what they had done, and therefore they were my indirect gurus. So I learned from them without their having to know that I'm learning from them. So in that sense, I was fortunate to thumb or cut my fingers, because had I done that, then I wouldn't be left with any thumb or fingers anymore. So I've learned a lot. So what you will see here in this small presentation is my learning. So nothing of what I'm presenting is original. I want to say that upfront. What I'm presenting to you is what I've gathered from various discussions, talks, readings, works of some very great people. So what I'll do is, and what I've planned, the way I plan to take it forward is that I will pick up some seemingly unrelated concepts and then try and weave them into a thread. And hopefully I'll try and make sure that they make sense at the end of it all. And I think then, of course, we'll have a very, I am looking forward to a very interactive session, very, 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 at the end of the session, where you will raise some very probing questions, which will prompt me to sort of examine things myself and come back and give answers. So this is a very ambitious try. And pardon me if I goof up, but I'm sure, I think, as people in the business of brands, we all goof up sometimes. I think we've had a brand like Coke goof up. We all remember what they did in the 80s when they launched the Coke Classic. So, brands and people with brands have a tendency to goof up once in a while. I'm sure each one of us in marketing and branding have goofed up a lot of times. So be it. I think H&M is another brand a major brand which goofed up, where they came out with this commercial where they had, a guy, a young kid who was black, where they
where the T-shirt said "coolest monkey in the jungle," and there was so much amount of backlash there to remove it. So brands and people in branding have this tendency of making a mistake, and this, of course, is a major mistake that we talk about. And I'm sure this is something that you all are aware. Where Google was offered to Excite. Excite was the #2 search engine in the US. They were offered. They could have bought Google at $750,000 US dollars, but they said no, it's not worth it, and the rest is history. So people in brand and branding have a history of goofing up. So pardon me if I goof up. It's, I'm part of the gang. Now, before we get on to performance, I thought I'll bring in a small concept of mind and intellect. That to me is the fundamental thing which will help us understand, and will help us comprehend the nuances of karma. And therefore it's important. And a lot has been done on mind and intellect. These are two separate things. I'm sure a whole lot of you are aware. Now, what is mind? Mind is all about feelings, emotions, cravings, impulses, affinity, likes, dislikes, and so on and so forth. So that's what our mind is full of, and it's always active, it's always working. We are emoting always. There are feelings that come into our mind. There are cravings at times. At times we are impulsive, and that's where the mind is completely active. Our likes and dislikes, our instant reactions, all that is a play of mind. Now, the Indian philosophical thought distinguishes mind with intellect, right? What they say is intellect is all about reasoning, about judgment, and therefore there's a very clear defining line between the mind and the intellect. Intellect is when you process information, when you look back, you process information basis whatever knowledge that you've gained, and then you look at things and you put them in the right perspective or whatever. So that's intellect. Now, if we can understand the difference between mind and intellect, I think half our work or half our approach towards performance is taken care of. And eventually, karma also is something which talks about a lot about intellect than the mind. So first is to recognize that mind and intellect are two different things. And what happens is, okay, intellect is also about, like I said, is about thinking. Now, what happens is that what drives us to action is either the mind or the intellect, right? And if we can, if we can distinguish between these two, we would start behaving differently, right? But yes, we cannot take any action without being driven either by the mind or by the intellect. So any action that we take is driven either by mind or the intellect. Now trouble begins. We get into a lot of trouble when the mind starts to overpower the intellect. And that's where a problem happens. For example, our mind tells us there is this craving that let me go out and light up a cigarette. That's what our mind is telling us. The intellect tells us that, look, I think, I am aging now and therefore there's no point. I should, it's not good for my lungs. I should avoid it. That's the intellect. But then the mind overrules or overpowers the intellect and still go out and light that cigarette. So that's where the mind overpowers the intellect. Now, this is a very small basic example that I gave you. But in every action that you take, there is this sort of conflict that's happening between the mind and the intellect. And if we allow the mind to overpower the intellect, then we are nullifying all the knowledge that we've gained, all the thinking that we have, or whatever we have processed in the past, we are ignoring that because we are letting mind, because mind is like I said earlier, mind is about influences, cravings, it's about likes and dislikes, it's about affinity, it's so when we let the mind overpower us or our decisions or our actions, and we are letting go of our intellect, that's where the problem begins. So we have to constantly look at ways and means of the intellect trying to control the mind and not the other way around, right? For example, I think if you look at the basic nature of the human mind, we tend to worry about the past, or we are very anxious about what's going to happen next, right? And that conflict is always there in the mind. And that is that conflict. Therefore, the mind is overworked because of that conflict. And so an overworked mind, when it overpowers the intellect, you can imagine what we are doing. We are taking actions on the basis of an overworked mind where there are worries and there is anxiety. And, and therefore, the actions are not to the best of our ability or our thinking capacity or the talent that we've been bestowed upon, or the experience that we've gained, or the knowledge that we have. And that is what we need to sort of take care as step one. So we got to be conscious that we have an intellect. We have to be conscious that there is this mind which is trying to overpower the intellect. The mind is overworked because of the past, the worries that we have, the anxieties that we have, and therefore is not perhaps quite capable of taking the right decision, and therefore will not push us to the right action. And that's where performance starts to suffer. So this constantly slipping in the past or the future breaks our concentration. Like I'm sure a whole lot of us are here in this session. There is this mind which is making you travel in the past. There is this thing that, hey, let this masterclass get over. I have to send this report to a client, or I have to send this creative to the client. I have timelines to meet. Now, all that is happening in your mind right now, right? And that is making you not concentrate as much as you might want to do. So the constant slipping into the past and the future of an overworked mind spoils us, and the mind starts to overpower the intellect. Now, in our kind of situation, the kind of industry that you guys are in, the mind always is constantly looking at, okay, if I do this well, if this campaign goes on well, what are the benefits it's going to get me, my client? What are the incentives I'm going to get? Will I get promoted or will I not get promoted? Will I be recognized? Or what if it fails? What if the campaign drops dead and nothing happens? What are the consequences? And that's what's happening in the mind, and it's taking you away from what you're supposed to be doing, right? The intellect tells us to stay in the present and forget about the past and forget about the future. But the mind is driving us to look at, the results, to look at what is going to be the impact, the risks that I'm going to be taking. And as a result of that, perhaps what you're producing is not the best that you're capable of. So an overworked mind trying to overpower the intellect is something that is leading us to a level of performance which is far lower than what we are capable of. And and I know that I'm talking to achievers. I know I'm talking to all of you guys in Indigo who have done a fabulous job. Having seen what you've done, I will still stick my neck out and say that, look, you're capable of doing even better. And that's where, and how can you make it better is when you start to concentrate. And how do you start to concentrate? When you do not let your mind overpower the intellect. I'll give you a very good example. I think I'm a big sports fiend, and so you will find a lot of sports examples in my discourses. This is a guy called James Watana. He's a Thai snooker player. Now, there's a small story behind this. Now, this guy, when he was very young and he was, making inroads into the professional circuit, there was a time that he was playing a tournament. He was playing the British Open, and I think he was in the quarters. And he had a lovely break. And apparently, this game that he was playing, he was in a fantastic position. He had to win. I mean, there was no way he could lose. And since he had reached the quarter, that's the time that you start getting paid on the circuit in the British Open. So he visualized the amount of money that he's gonna get. Now, for somebody who had been brought up in the slums of Thailand, the amount of money that he was getting, if he would have won the quarters, was reasonably good. And while the other person was on the table, while his competitor was on the table, this guy started to evaluate the check that he's gonna get in pounds. And he converted that into bahts. And then he realized that's a lot of money. And then he realized that what he can do with that money. So he started to shop with that money in the mind while he was there waiting for his turn to come in. And he was in a winning position. But because his mind traveled all over, this guy, when he came back to the table, he just couldn't hit properly. And he lost a match which was in his pocket. And he was all of about 18 years of age. Now the same guy, and now this is what the mind does, it spoils your concentration. He was actually celebrating and enjoying the money that he would have got. And I think that's a lesson that he learned. Fortunately for him, he had somebody like a Keith Sethi who talked to him, a whole lot of other people who talked to him. Now imagine the same gentleman goes and plays another tournament in the British Open, and just before he is going for the match, he is given the news that his father has been shot in Bangkok. And he presumed that his father's going to survive, but he knew that it's been shot and it's a grievous injury. He goes on and wins the match. After the match, he is told that his ticket has been booked from Manchester back to Thailand, and he can actually fly back because his father is no more. This guy decides to stay on, right? He stays on, and he reaches the final of the tournament. He lost the final, but he won the quarters, the semis, went to the finals, played a very good final, lost the finals, and only then did he fly back for his father's last rites. Now imagine the same person who one time could not control his mind was able to control his mind after having been given the news that his father is being shot, is badly injured, may not survive, and then later that his father is no more, and he decides to keep that separate and still comes back and wins the semi-final. Now that's the play of the mind, because what happened is that he realized his mind was telling him, was full of emotion. In fact, he said that he would go back to his room and cry and wail and all that, but then he would dress up and come back to the table and play the game. Now, what he was able to do was he was able to let his mind be, and the intellect, there's nothing that he can do now. His father is no more, he's gone. He will reach in time for the funeral, for the last rite. Right now, he's got a job to do. He's gone in a position where he can win the tournament, win the semi-finals, reach the finals, and therefore he let his intellect, control his actions, and we know what the result is. So the intellect and mind, I mean, there are innumerable examples. I picked this one up. There are innumerable examples where the intellect and the mind, the conflict can actually be by consciousness, by being conscious of not letting your mind play and bringing in your intellect, we can win over the mind. And, and therefore what we say is that we need to get our intellect to rein in our mind. Our mind has a tendency to go places. It drifts, it goes and it moves at a very fast speed. But it is our intellect, and that's our conscious effort that we need to put in to make sure that our intellect reigns in our mind, and we are in control of the mind, and we are thinking. So that was the first issue, intellect and mind. Now that brings me to the second contentious issue, and the second contentious issue is excellence. So when we're talking about performance, we can't leave behind excellence. A lot of work has been done in excellence. I'm sure you would have read a lot, heard a lot, but there is this very famous definition now. I think you get it on WhatsApp every now and then. It goes back to the era of Aristotle, and this quote of his is an awesome quote. If you let it sink into your mind and your intellect, it's an awesome quote. What it says is that we are what we repeatedly do. So what we do repeatedly is what becomes of us, is what we are. And excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit. So if we try and excel every now and then, if we repeatedly try and excel, we would become excellent in whatever we do. Of course, in the modern days, there is no better guru on excellence than Tom Peters. In the 80s, he wrote this wonderful book, In Search of Excellence. He's gone and written a whole lot of other books. His works are amazing. He recently wrote this book called The Excellence Dividend. He also wrote a fantastic book called The Pursuit of Wow. Of course, a lot of companies he talked about then, there are a whole lot of other companies which have come in and taken over. He wrote these books in the era when there was no digital technology, and there was no internet, and so we didn't have the Googles of the world, and we didn't have the Microsofts of the world. But so his examples are brick and mortar examples. But he was the first guy in the 80s to stand up and start talking about excellence. And his work is amazing. If you get a chance to sort of read his work, fantastic work. Now, Tom Peters came to India, and that is what I wanted to bring in. Tom Peters came to India, and when he came to India, he went to Bangalore and he saw the chaos on the road, the traffic on the road, and the the way our systems are and the way our infrastructure is and the way we go about our lives in India. And then he started, it intrigued him. He started looking at the Indian philosophy and what. And then he came back and said, look, I am a fool to come to India and talk to Indians about excellence, because Indians know about excellence better than anybody else, right? And I will narrate to you that eureka moment of his when he discovered this. But before that, some quotes from Tom Peters. So, if we think that we are excellent, we would start thinking that, hey, I am indispensable to Indigo. I'm doing the best job. I mean, I'm very good in client servicing. I'm very good in creative. I'm very good in analytics, whatever. And we start to think that we are indispensable. Now, what happens is that, okay, at least for now, you're indispensable, right? And that is why, because today the organization has nobody else to choose from but you, right? And that's why you are indispensable. That's the feeling that you get. So in the moment, that in the moment nature of excellence means what? That if today, right now, at this moment, I'm excellent, it means that excellence is a moving target. It means that what I'm achieving right now will not be considered excellent the next second. And therefore, excellence becomes a moving target. And that's the gist of what Tom Peters talks about. That excellence is a moving target. What you achieve, therefore, next time, that will not classify as excellent if it classified as excellent now. And therefore, I think this is a quote that I really love. A lot of people in marketing and branding hate me for this quote, but I think, I can understand the agony. It's very difficult to live this, but excellence isn't about meeting these specs. It's about, and this is very ambitious. And this, if you can make this the mantra of your performance, you would find that you are exceeding all the benchmarks that you yourself would have set in terms of achievement, in terms of the excellent work that you put in. So it is not about meeting the spec, it is about setting the spec. And that is, is Tom Peters' entire piece on excellence. So if you are trying to set the spec, which means that you are the leader of the pack, which means that you are thinking beyond what has been thought before, and therefore there is thinking involved, and therefore that's where the intellect comes in, right? It defines what the client sees as quality right now, this minute. Tomorrow, if you're good, you will reset that expectation, and you would think beyond the client. You would think ahead of the client, and you get into a situation where the brief and the brand becomes yours. You become the custodian of the brand and the brief, and not the client. And that, from an Indigo perspective, is what excellence would be. And when I mentioned about Gautam Rakshit of Avenues when we were creating Onida, I think that's what I refer to. I mean, there were times when he thought ahead of us. We were the clients. We thought we owned the brand, but he brought in a term called parenting. And he said that he's a brand parent and he's a co-parent. So the client and the agency was, we are co-parents. So Indigo, each one of you is a co-parent with the brand owner. And that's what we need to do. Now, coming back to Tom Peters. So when he came to India and he had this eureka moment saying, why the hell is he coming and talking to Indians about excellence? He said, and he's written that in one of his books, that, Indians knew about excellence all along. And the example that he narrates is about the Trinity. He says, what is excellence? Fundamentally, excellence is about first creation. You create something which is wow, which is terrific, which is something which has not been attempted before. So it's a process of creation. And then you maintain it for a while, you maintain it for a while, you allow it to thrive, right? And then you need to destruct it so that you can recreate. And that's what he said is basically the Indian Trinity of Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. One of them is a creator, right? Vishnu is the guy who's the maintenance guy. And then there is a guy who's destructing it so that there is space being created for new creation. And if the balance of these three, where you create, maintain, destruct, is what will lead you to excellence. And that's the Indian way, he says. And therefore he felt that, look, all the work that I've done is all right. That's all Western thought. But Indians don't need to be taught excellence. They intrinsically know it, right? The only thing is that in somewhere, which is typical about a whole lot of things about Indians, we've forgotten, what is there in our heritage. So this is excellence. So you create, you maintain it for a while, you let it thrive and flourish, but you don't have to wait for it to start declining or decaying. You then destruct and start recreating. And if you do that process time in, time again, right? It's like something you ask yourself before you go to sleep, what did I destruct today? And you don't have to necessarily destruct the bad things. You have that, of course, you have to do necessarily. But what you have to also do is destruct good things. You know, a lot of times we stop excelling. And I think we forget what Tom Peters talked about, you know, that excellence is a moving target. We stop excelling because we believe that what we've achieved is so good, right? And it's going to last forever, right? And therefore, we don't destruct the good part. And these things, they become mantras. And the moment you get trapped in mantras, then you are actually repeating yourself. And if you're repeating yourself, you're not excelling. So therefore, destruction of even good things and good practices is important so that you can actually rethink, recreate, and come back and do something which is even bigger, you know, and has more, has a larger wow element than the previous one, right? So now let's try and put that in the thread. So we talked about mind and intellect. Excellence, you know, if we were trying to sort of put that in the thread, excellence is an intellect thing, right? Excellence is not a mind thing. Excellence is an intellect thing, right? So this brings us to the third contentious issue, which is happiness and satisfaction. So I picked up 3 issues and I'm trying to relate them to karma and to performance. Again, I'll go back to an example from sports. There is, we all know Sachin Tendulkar. Now, a friend of mine who's a journalist happened to have met Sachin Tendulkar when he had just scored about 5 centuries in Test, in international cricket. He went on to score 100 centuries. And he was all of about 20 years of age. And this friend of mine, who's now a very renowned leading sports commentator and a journalist, he went and asked him that, you know, Sachin, are you happy? Now this guy, apparently Sachin, as for, you know, what my friend tells me, took a pause and he thought for about about 2-3 minutes. There was pin drop silence, and then he comes back and says, "I am happy, but I'm not satisfied." I mean, imagine this coming from a 20-year-old. We all know what Sachin is now. We all know what he's achieved. But imagine a 20-year-old saying this, and you know, and it's a lovely example to sort of you know, discuss here in this context, because what is satisfaction of what has happened, right? Now imagine what he said is that every time I go out to bat, the scoreboard shows 0. I have to go out and accumulate those 100 runs to reach a landmark, to reach a century, right? I feel happy. Yes, of course, I feel happy that I've reached 100. But when I analyze, I also realize that, look, I nicked one ball, which went down between the second and the third slip, you know, and it could have been a catch, or I could have run 3 runs there. I ran only 2, or there was this bouncer which was all there to be hooked for a 6. I let that go. So he knows that even while he scored 100, he's happy having reached that milestone, but he also knows that there were certain areas that he needs to improve, and therefore he's not satisfied. And that, I think this example actually explains it beautifully. And you know, and the best part is that, you know, there was a time when Sachin scored his 95th century. I think Indian Express carried a headline which said, "I am happy but not satisfied." Because what Sachin said, and I think this next quote is a wonderful quote coming from him. He says, when you score a century, you say you're happy but not satisfied. He says satisfaction is engaging, like engaging the handbrake of your car and hoping the car would move forward, right? I mean, that's what he says satisfaction is. So we have to enjoy, you know, our successes. So we have to sort of celebrate our success. We need to be happy, right? That's important. That's an important part of our mental makeup. We need to be happy having achieved a milestone. But should you be satisfied? You got to take a call, right? Because the moment you say that I'm satisfied, which means that what you've done is near perfection or is perfection, and therefore there's nothing for you to improve, or there's nothing for you to go back and reinvent. There's nothing for you to destruct. And that's where complacency and mediocrity sets in. And that is what we need to challenge and ask ourselves every now and then. Am I satisfied or am I happy? You may be happy. You've done a great job. You made a good pitch. You won the client. We must have a party. Yes. I think please go out, let your hair down, celebrate. But should that satisfy you? No. You know, it should keep you happy, but you must keep asking yourself, how could I do it better? Or how can I improve on what I've done? So when we talk about satisfaction and happiness, and we look at it in context of mind and intellect, satisfaction is the intellect thing, right? The mind is something which will make you feel very happy, and perhaps will tempt you to say, "Hey, what the hell? You've done this, yeah? Take it easy, man. You've done enough," and will push you towards satisfaction. But you have to again rein in your mind, and you got to think through your intellect, and therefore satisfaction is an intellect thing, and chasing satisfaction is an intellect. So it's about the choices that we make between mind and intellect, between excellence or mediocrity, or between satisfaction or being happy. Now, these are choices, these are conscious decisions that each one of us is supposed to make, and each one of that decision, mind you, will help us, improve or enhance our performance, right? So it's all the intellect thing, right? Excellence is an intellect thing. Satisfaction is an intellect thing. Being happy is a mind thing, right? Accepting what you've done as the best is a mind thing, and rejoicing about the fact that you achieved. Yes, you must rejoice, you must celebrate, but you also must know that yes, this happiness is short-lived, right? I still have not reached that level, or I can still improve on what I've done. I can still destruct and move it. So now comes the performance bit. So while intellect tells us to focus on performance, the mind tempts us to look at results. And I think that's where the biggest problem with most professionals in today's world is. That, what we are doing is that we are constantly focusing on the output, on the result, rather than focusing on performance. Now, focusing on performance is a mind thing, right? Which, I mean, a mind thing. Now, the moment you're looking at results, and that is resting too heavy in your mind, your performance is bound to suffer. Few things may happen. One, it may build so much amount of pressure on you, what we call as performance pressure, because there is this result that you presuppose will come for the efforts that you're putting in. And that stress will ensure that you will not be able to give your best, right? That's one. Or you will find the task too daunting. The mind will tell you, not worth it. We're not going to win this pitch. We're not going to get this client ever feel happy. This campaign is not going to work. There are not enough budgets or whatever. Your mind will tell you will hold you back from performing. And there's this very interesting term that I use often is a whole lot of us at times. What is mediocrity? Somebody in one of the sessions asked me, you talk about mediocrity, define mediocrity. It's very difficult to define. But I was reminded of one phrase, very beautifully used by one of those Indian management gurus. He talked about how at times we are satisfactorily underperforming, right? And I think it's very apt in today's discussion to sort of bring that in. So you are underperforming, but you are satisfied. And that is mediocrity. When you are satisfactorily underperforming, that's mediocrity, right? So when the intellect tells us to focus on performance, the mind will tell you to look at the output. And the mind will tell you, okay, if I do this, this is what's going to happen. This is the client's going to feel happy. I'm going to get promoted. I'm going to get a few more batches in my, to sort of show off. This will become my campaign or whatever. You are so focusing on output. And that's where karma comes in. Karma tells you to focus on performance and forget the output. The output will come in. You will get what you deserve, right? And that's where the entire karma philosophy comes into place, where it tells you, it eggs you on to sort of focus on the task at hand, to make sure that you excel in what you're doing and forget about the result. That's what karma is. Now, while the intellect is telling us to chase performance, the mind tells us a lot of things. The mind tells us, itna paisa mein itna hi, and that's where mediocrity creeps in, right? There are times when your friends walk up and say, "Yaar, why the hell are you working till 8 o'clock in the night? We are all going to the pub downstairs. Why don't you join us? Abhi kitna tere ko zyada paisa milta hai kya?" I mean, that kind of thing. So this entire compartmentalization of itna paisa mein itna hi, and a lot of us, we are holding on to not delivering our best, waiting for some other job, some other time, some other instance where we will deliver. And I think that's something that I see a lot of professionals today suffer from. That, they don't want to make today's inning, this innings of theirs, the best inning of their life. So what we are looking at, if we are sort of trying to sort of chisel this down to some fine points, are you wanting this job, this innings of yours, to be the best innings of your life? If that is your driving force, you would automatically strive for excellence. You would automatically, not look at output. You would look at performance. Results will come in, and that's what the karma thing is. So, are you making this innings of yours the best innings of your life? And you don't need an HR or you don't need a boss to sort of supervise you or to evaluate you. You got to evaluate yourself. Am I doing enough to make this innings the best innings of my life? Future is now. A lot of us, we suffer from what I call as a Ahilya complex. We have all the talent, but we wait for Lord Rama to come and touch us so that we can transform ourselves into beautiful human beings. We forget that we live in Kali Yuga. No Lord Rama is going to come and nobody's going to touch us. And like he did it to that stone, and the stone transformed into a beautiful woman, Ahilya. I don't think that's going to happen to us. We got to be our own Lord Ramas. We got to actually allow our own talents to flourish. And the best way to allow our talent to flourish is where you raise up your stakes in every issue that you take on, every errand, every work that you take on, every assignment that you take on, with the approach that I'm going to make the best of it. This is going to be the best effort that I've ever made in my life. And that is excellence. And the moment we get into itna paisa mein itna hi, that's where mediocrity creeps in, right? So while intellect tells us to raise the bar, not to be satisfied easily, the mind gets happy too soon or too easily. Also, what we've also seen is at times when you not put in your best and your mind is not happy, you work hard, you labor to be happy. You say, okay, let me go and have a drink. I'll feel good about it, right? And you go and with somebody, you curse everyone. You curse the client. You said the client doesn't understand his business. He didn't understand. You get upset with the client. You get upset with your boss. You get upset with your creative guy. You said this guy did not make the right kind of, the artwork was wrong. The designing was so stupid. The analytics led us to a different path altogether. We've got it completely goofed up. You put the blame on everybody else. And then you say, I did my best and you look, I'm happy. That's where performance suffers. So what we have to do is we have to keep checking out. The mind will keep taking you onto a path where it will make you to feel happy. You would want to feel happy, right? Or you will feel victimized, right? In either case, your performance is suffering. So the intellect tells you to raise the bar constantly. Having said this, now let's look at karma. Karma in very simple terms it means action. I think we've got a very limited time span here to sort of cover this up, and I've already exceeded 45 minutes. So I'll try and wrap this up now. Karma means action, very simple. Now, is there a law or a norm that governs action? Yes, there is, and that's what karma is all about. It's a law of cause and effect. It's like what you do, what you reap in, what you sow, you will reap that later. So that's the karma law of cause and effect. So what you deliver, what you do is what's gonna come back to you in terms of results, right? So it's very simple. The example that they normally give is that if you sow the seeds of a mango tree, you won't get an apple tree. You will get a mango. You will get a mango fruit. And if you sow in an apple seed, you will get an apple tree. You won't get a mango there. So that's the example that is often given. It's a very popular example. A lot of people give this example. Basically, the idea is to make it simpler for us to understand that what you sow is what you reap in later. And karma tells you to focus on work, right? So what you sow, you reap. So your destiny at any moment is determined by your own past actions and nothing else. Now, let's not get philosophical about it. Let's look at it professionally from today's point of view. So I am not saying you should be too concerned about your past. Let what has happened. You can't sort of relive your past. You cannot go back and change your past. But what you can do from this moment onwards is that make sure that your actions are the ones which is something that's going to make you proud of, right? Your actions are something which are very close to excellence. There is this effort of this striving for excellence is something which is leaking out of everything that you're doing, which is oozing out of everything that you're doing. Now, if from today we take on this path of excelling in everything that we do, what you're going to do is you're going to tweak your destiny. The results of the effort that you're putting in today, the results of that tomorrow will make sure that, that your destiny, whatever it was, your luck or whatever your fortune was or whatever, you are tweaking it favorably. So you begin from now. So it's like what you sow in today, you will reap in tomorrow. And therefore, if you sow in excellence today, you would get the kind of output that you deserve to get, right? What you deserve to get, big words, right? So at this moment, right, you are a victim of what you've done in the past. So let's not even get there, right? So past is actually from this moment backwards. So there's no point sort of going there. That's what the mind at times tells us. Mind keeps pushing us to the past. Karma is an intellect thing, So you start focusing from today, from right now. You get what you deserve and not what you desire is what basically karma tells you. That what you will get is what you deserve. The effort that you've put in is what will get you the results. What you desire is completely meaningless, right? You will get what you deserve, and you would get, if you don't get it the first time, you will get the second time. But be at it, try and push yourself, try and push the boundaries, and try and excel, right? And it depends on the actions that you take, the way you execute whatever briefs that are given to you. That's what karma is. So you create your own future. Wonderful line, not mine again. You are the architect of your future. It depends on what you do and what you do now. So if you believe this, then you start pushing yourself to excellence. You start focusing on performance because that is in your hands. Result is destiny, is not in your hands, but your efforts will have a bearing on the results, on the output, right? Leave that to whoever. If you believe in God, leave that to God. If you believe you are an atheist, you don't believe in God, you believe that in forces, you believe in some other power, let that be. But what is in your control is performance. Your future was not in your control. Your destiny was not in your control. But you can actually tweak your destiny by putting in an effort, by bringing in excellence, right? And that's where performance comes in. That if we can focus on performance, and again, performance is an intellect thing. If I can focus on performance, if I can focus on excelling, I will automatically get the results that I deserve, right? That's what karma tells us, and that's where the entire link is. So if we were to draw a link of what we've discussed, we talked about striving for excellence. We talked about raising the bar of not being satisfied when we talked about happiness versus satisfaction. Now, striving for excellence, not being satisfied, raising the bar every time, delivering your best, and will lead you to focus on performance and not on output. And again, the entire thing of how performance is an intellect thing, not a mind thing, right? So it will bring in that focus on performance. You would not look at the output. Somewhere, yes, you need to understand where are you going. From that perspective, output is important because okay, this is the direction that I'm taking. But that's it, leave it there. Focus on what you're doing. Are you striving for excellence? Are you raising the bar? Are you delivering better than what you delivered yesterday, right? Are you destructing some good and bad practices and bringing something new? Are you reinventing yourself? And that's where this is all intellect. And that's where you need to get the intellect to rein in your mind. The intellect reins in your mind, brings performance into focus. You start working towards excellence. You try and make this innings of yours the best innings of your life. And that's the attitude. And that's where it will lead to cause and effect. That's where the thing comes in. And therefore, it will lead to a result. You get what you deserve, not what you desire. And that's the karma thing. So that's how karma and performance get related. Before I close, I think I would bring it in the current context, since we are living in very crazy times. So every day we are struggling to make our choices between love and fear. I think especially the kind of time that we are living in now with the COVID-19, between belief or despair. Now the mind, and I think it's important to understand this, that the mind perceives ambiguity or unpredictability as a hazard. So, and look at the way, suddenly what is not happening, which is not work related, but is happening in your surrounding, right? There is ambiguity of what is the future going to be, what's going to happen, when is the COVID-19 vaccination going to be out? These are things which are not in your hands. But they have created so much amount of ambiguity around you that the mind is overloaded, and the mind perceives ambiguity or unpredictability as a hazard, and therefore the mind also stops functioning the way it is supposed to function. In fact, the ambiguity eats up a lot of our mind, and it therefore takes away a lot of our energy. We have to work to minimize ambiguity. I think even the mind needs to be fed, and therefore you can do that by being optimistic. How do you minimize complexity? You got to be optimistic, right? Now again, that's a choice, and it is an intellect thing. So being optimistic, so something which is a personal skill, which is not related to a job, but I think is important in today's context, that even today, even when we are going through this pandemic, even when we are going through this threat of, this fear that we have of the COVID-19, and, of what's happening around us, the way the medical facilities and medical infrastructure is cracking up, we see some crazy stories which are very disheartening. All this is impacting our mind any which ways, and but we got to be optimistic, and that's a choice we make, and where the intellect comes in. You got to look at from a perspective saying, for example, a small stat that the number of people who died in India ever since the pandemic came into India, ever since COVID-19 came to India, it's been about 90 days. The number of people who died is less than the number of people who die on roads, in road accidents in India in 4 days. So number of deaths in 90 days is less than the number of deaths that happen in 4 days. I'm not saying, every death is a bad thing, is a sad thing. Whoever loses a dear one, it's a big loss for them. But I'm just saying that, in order to sort of place it in the right perspective, did the number of deaths on the roads in India, did it stop you from stepping out of the house? It did not. What you started doing is that if you were driving a two-wheeler, you started wearing a helmet. If you were driving a car, you started to put in your seatbelt and be safe, right? So we stepped out. So that's the perspective. So you got to maybe wear your mask, take all precautions, wash your hands maybe 20 times a day or whatever. Take precautions, but you must put that in that perspective, and that is where optimism comes in. And again, optimism, like I said, is the intellect thing. It's a choice. It's a radical choice in today's time. It's a hard choice in today's time, a brave choice, but nevertheless, it's the choice that we have. So I can choose to be optimistic, or I can actually allow the fear that my mind is gripped with to overtake me and make me completely useless. So it's a choice that we make, and again, this comes out of intellect. One of those parting comments: optimism is an instinct to inhale while suffocating. Optimism is not uncool; it's rebellious and daring, and it's an intellect thing. So be optimistic, be safe. And that's all I have. I think we open up to questions now.
Thank you, Giriraj sir. Indeed, a very interesting one. I would open it up for question and answer session. If anybody wants to interact with Mr. Giriraj sir, any questions, please feel free to unmute and ask. You can also put it up on the chat box.
First of all, sir, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. You've kind of raised the bar of our masterclass, actually, right? But I'll, take away one thing, saying that, we are happy but not satisfied.
That's a good one. Yeah?
So we will, try and get, master coaches who would, raise the bar further that you have done today. Thank you so much. As always, right? You reminded me of that quarterly meeting we had in Bangalore when you came into the region for review. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time.
I think it's a privilege. Always anything for you, Joseph. Yes, anybody's got any questions, I'll attempt. I don't know whether I know the answer, but I'll still attempt with all my honesty and integrity to answer them.
Hi, Giriraj. Ramesh here. Thank you so much for this amazing session. I mean, it's really insightful. I have two questions. First, let me talk about, you mentioned Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh. Creation, maintenance, and destruction. Can you give one example how it actually works in business with your experience?
Okay. So I think you see that every day. For example, I think the industry that you guys are in, you create a campaign for a client. The campaign works. So you've created a campaign, it's worked. You let it run its course. That's maintenance. You let the campaign run its course. That's maintenance. But after a time, even though it's working for the client, even though he's getting what he or she is supposed to get in terms of traction, in terms of connects, in terms of sales or whatever, you still come back and propose the next campaign. So a thing which is working, you sustain it for a while. So first you create a thing, you sustain it for a while, and then you go back and say, let's raise the bar, right? Let's not be satisfied with what we've got. We happy we delivered what we delivered. Let's look at a new campaign. Let's look at approaching the entire brief in a completely new way. Of course, keeping the basic fundamentals of the brand intact. And that's where you come back and you recreate. So when you recreate, when you come back and propose a new campaign, you're actually destroying or destructing the old one. And there was nothing wrong with the old campaign. Maybe it won you awards, it won the client business. So we do that. You guys do that every now and then. So the issue is that you keep the basic elements, that's the channel part. You keep the basic flavor of the brand. You keep the brand values the same, but you create a new communication. You create a new campaign, and that's where you destructed something and you've recreated something. So you guys do that every day. You take any business, you come out with products. The product has a lifetime that this product will last, or this technology will last so many years. But after that, if you do not reinvent, another example that everybody quotes is of Nokia. Nokia was ruling the world, and I think they created something which was so fabulous, and they sustained it for a while. But they did not disrupt that technology. I mean, they attempted to. They brought in a new technology. That's the wrong decision. But something came on. Android came in, and look what happened. That there are examples. If we don't do that, we see examples. An example that I often give is of Mr. Amitabh Bachchan, right? If you look back, Amitabh Bachchan's entire branding was an angry young man, and I think in branding classes, it's an example that people will talk about. And because his image was an angry young man, he got stereotyped and he started playing those roles. But the masses would love it. You would not want to see Amitabh Bachchan in any other way except for an angry young man. Then suddenly the young man was not so young, and he became slightly, he started touching or flirting with comedy, and therefore his basic brand promise got altered. And suddenly you realize that he's got a son who's 22 years of age, and he's got a daughter who's getting married, and he's not young anymore, and therefore you refuse to accept that young part of it. Now, Mr. Bachchan played that on for a while, but if his movies, the Lal Badshah kind of movies, they were disasters, because suddenly he did not destruct the image that was built up. He started staying with that image a bit too long, and that's where he decided to take a sabbatical. Came back with in a new avatar, with a French beard, with playing the roles of his age, and in a reinvented guy. And suddenly we accepted him like, wow. And then, of course, then Star went and signed him for Kaun Banega Crorepati, and the rest, as I say, is history, where he's playing himself, and he's playing like the Dadaji or whatever, and he's talking to kids, and everybody comes and, touches his feet. So he's reinvented himself. He destructed that image of angry young man. He carried it for a while, so that was preservation. But what he later preserved was his basic core value, which is histrionics, which is his capacity to to speak dialogues, whether be it in English or in Hindi, so beautifully well. And that is what was built up in Kaun Banega Crorepati, right? And therefore he destructed that, and till he did not destruct, he started suffering. So it's another example of, and we in business, you guys do that every day.
Yeah.
Very well explained. Thank you so much. Another quick one. You mostly emphasize on intellect. As I understand, intellect is nothing but a part of intelligence. But nowadays, we lot of talk about EQ as well. How can you keep balance between EQ and intellect in your business life?
Okay, I think from where I come from, Ramesh, I also take EQ as a part of intellect, right? Because I think emotion is a mind thing, and therefore, if you are able to sort of rein in those emotions, basis your intellect, and I think there's a play of intellect, and therefore, if you have a play of intellect in your emotions, you have a higher EQ, right? So again, the play of mind and intellect comes in there as well. If you get overawed by your emotions, if you get too carried away by your emotions, you do not come across as a good professional, right? You would take decisions which are emotional, spur of the moment, which are actually decisions taken by the mind and not by the intellect. But if you somehow marry your emotions, you have to have emotions. We are all human beings. We can't, we can't be without emotions, So we will have emotions. Idea is to sort of process them, respect the emotion, but also try and put them in context, bring a sense of balance, and that is where intellect comes in. And the moment you bring emotions and you put them in the frame of intellect, your EQ automatically rises, right? And that's where then with a higher EQ, because there is a play of intellect, you are able to handle situations.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Most welcome.
Two questions here, Giraj sir.
Yeah.
One is, what are the ways in which an individual can deliberately stop his mind from taking over the intellect? This is from Mrunmayee Joshi.
Who's that? I mean, if you can identify yourself, can I get your name, please?
Mrunmayee Joshi.
All right. Yeah. So very difficult question to answer. It's a very pertinent one. But yes, I think since we are attempting this, I think it's important that we address this also. So how do you rein in your mind? I mean, how do you let intellect rein in your mind? I think the first step we have all taken today, whether we like it or not, consciously or unconsciously, the fact that we've done this session, you've already taken the first step. At the subconscious level now, this is going to rest in your mind, in your intellect, that mind and intellect are two different things, and mind will make me do things impromptu, whereas intellect will bring in a sense of balance. So this seed has already been impregnated. I think that is already there in your mind. So that's the step one. That has already been done by your sheer attending this session. Now it's up to you to sort of start working on it. And how you work on it is that every time that there is an impulse, you reason with yourself. And that's where you will start automatically getting the intellect getting a large, and slowly, gradually, it will come to you naturally. And there will reach a time where everything that you will do out of intellect and less out of mind. So it's a question of practicing. It's a question of doing, of bringing that focus. And if you want to go to the other extreme, the extreme that they say, which is what is Dhyan, which is meditation. What is meditation? Where you become one with the universe, where you are free of thoughts. When they say that you're free of thought, means what? You have such control over your mind that your mind is thinking nothing. That's the ultimate stage. I think it is very difficult to reach that stage. We are all struggling to reach there or even halfway there. But that's the ultimate of it, where your mind is completely without any thoughts. And that's where your mind is clean. And that's where intellect gets a complete, clean playing field. The intellect can do whatever it wants. And that's where you start trusting your instincts. And that's where your intellect, your past, your knowledge comes into play. Because your mind is completely without any thoughts. But that's the ultimate thing. I'm saying it will take some time for all of us to get there. But what we can do is from today onwards, become more conscious. And I think I've already impregnated those seeds, like I've already put in those seeds. So you have to start becoming more conscious that, hey, this is what my mind is saying, but what is my intellect saying? The moment you start asking yourself these questions repeatedly, it becomes a part of your habit. It becomes a part of your thinking process. And that's where you will start letting intellect have a larger play in your life than your mind.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. One more question here. This is from Cap Singh. I'm assuming this is Kapil.
Yes, Kapil, Jose, yes.
How we can control our monkey mind?
You'll have to define to me what is a monkey mind, because you're leaving it to my intellect, and my intellect is running places now.
I think what Kapil, please jump in if you want to unmute yourself and jump in. But I think what Kapil wants to ask is, your mind is always jumping from one thing to the other.
One place to, okay. I think that's what he meant by monkey mind, that it's jumping like monkeys jump from one tree to another, one branch to another. Yeah, that's, I think I tried to answer that there. It's, the mind has a tendency. And we allow our mind, we have always allowed our mind to play the monkey mind game, and it is thrilling, it is thrilling, because let's face it, because if the mind, and I think it is essential also, because if the mind was not playing these games with you, sorrows will become more deeper, right? Sadness will become very deep inside us. So it is, I think, to some amount of time, you can let the mind be the monkey mind, to play around a little bit. But eventually, when it comes to decisions, when it comes to professional decisions or decisions of life or delivery, which is what our job is, which is our basic job, then you have to rein in that mind. Right? Then you got to rein in that mind, and to control that mind is to again come back and say, hey, what is it that is expected of you? I think that's something that we very rarely ask ourselves. We presume that we know what is expected of me, but if you start asking that question to yourself, what is expected of me? And don't try and get that answer in terms of deliverables, not in terms of output, in terms of performance. So even if your boss says that, okay, I need this kind of revenue from you, just for example, your question to yourself is, okay, that revenue, supposing I'm supposed to get 5 crores of business in this year. Now that 5 crore is an output, right? Now, what do I need to do to get to that 5 crore? By just thinking that I have to get to that 5 crore will not get me there. Now, and if I let my monkey mind, as you call it beautifully, I'll borrow this term from you, use it in my next workshop. That's a very nice term. Huh? Thank you. So if I let my monkey mind play, what will my monkey mind do? Every time I get a business, I'll say, okay, I've got 50 lakhs, so I'm left with 4.5 crores. Your mind will be only occupied with cutting things out, and so that how close are you to 5 crores? Whereas your mind should be focusing on what will get you to that 5 crores. So I have to maybe make pitches worth 25 crores. I have to make 20 pitches to get to 25 crores. And out of that, I lose some, win some. I have a 20% success ratio, and therefore I'll get 5 crores. And if I get lucky, I'll maybe get 6. And that's what I'm doing. And if I fall short, then there is this big client of mine. I'll try and enhance his ticket size and make sure that if there is a shortfall somewhere, I still am able to do my 5 crores. So you would have to focus on performance by asking yourself this. And the moment you start focusing on performance, you are reining in your monkey mind, right?
Sure.
I hope I answered that.
Yeah. Thank you, Subhash sir.
Cool. Giraj sir, I have one question. So there is this, principle of form, storm, which is Bruce Tuckman, I think, early 60s brought in this concept, right? So is that something similar to what you, kind of said when you said, you kind of create and then maintain and destroy? Is it
something very similar? I think, but that's a concept of the 60s or the 70s, I think, late 60s, early 70s. But our concept of, destruction, preservation is an age-old concept, and I think one example, Jose, is of destruction, maintenance, and creation is nature.
Yeah.
Right. If you look at nature, there's no better example of excellence than nature. Despite the fact what mankind has done to nature, there is still a sense of balance there, right? So you would find that there is people. It's not only the bad guys die, the good guys die too. So that's nature's way of destructing, right? Trees and plants, they have they shed leaves, right? And that's their way of destructing, and then therefore new leaves come in, new fruits come in. All right. So they are constantly doing this process of destruction, maintenance, and some maintenance and sustenance and recreation, right? So we got to learn from there. This concept of forming, norming, I think came in there, but I think largely, it's another template. I would say another template of the same philosophy. Maybe the roots were different. Maybe these people did not look at this, but basically leads us to the same place.
Sure. Cool. It's maybe just karma, Giraj sir. This year, 2020 at Indigo Consulting, every year we have a theme for the company. This year's theme is excellence delivered.
I didn't know this. I think it's my good karma and your good karma that we're talking about excellence.
Okay, guys, any more questions? Please feel free to put on the chat. We are kind of almost at the end of the time we have from our master coach today.
Any more questions, people? So Mrinmay has, she's asking if there are any books or podcasts or blogs that you would suggest in order to gain more knowledge in this field, sir.
All right. So there is a large part of what I discussed on mind and intellect comes out of a gentleman called Partha Sarthi. There is a lot of his stuff available on YouTube. He wrote an excellent book, and that book was given to me. This example that I gave you of James Wattana was an example. Geet Sethi, the 9-time world billiard champion. Geet and I do some workshops together. We call them reverse flick, where we look back at his life. And Geet is the guy who introduced me to Partha Sarthi. And so Partha Sarthi wrote a book. Unfortunately, it is not in print, but there is a Kindle version available. It's called the Vedanta Treatise. If you can look at that, if you can pick that book up, fantastic. I'm sure they will publish that book soon because it's a bestseller. but there are a lot of his lectures on the YouTube. You can have a look at that. Interestingly, there's one book that I must share, which is completely unrelated to this, but I think taught me, when I was growing up, a lot about excellence. It's a very small book, a book called Jonathan Livingston Seagull, right? If you can just read that book, you can finish that book in a day, but that book stays with you for life, I think, and if you can then look at it from a framework of excellence, I think it's an awesome book to read. It's a quick, easy read. It has a lot of graphics and things like that. Very small book, finish it in a day. I think that's a book that, oh yeah, that's there. Yeah, that's there. So you could read that book. I think it's a fabulous book, very light, but it sinks in. Allow it to sink in, and you will really relish it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, sir. Once again, I owe a big one for you, for your time, and
always a pleasure. Anything for you here. Anything.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your valuable time.
Everyone, bye-bye.
We
Thank
look
you,
forward
Rajka.
to host you again.
Lovely. My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.